Welcome again to the fourth and final meeting of the committee. Let's take roll call if we can. Jerome Heisler.
Fred Deal.
Greg Sutton.
Robert Tunnel. Matt Croyder.
Vanessa Cohen. Caitlin O'Connell.
Alex Bodegas.
Mimi Rail.
Steve Matra.
Brian Ing couldn't make it today.
And we have folks online too. Aaron?
Yep, Erin Lee.
Great. We have 8
Welcome, Aaron.
out of 8 subcommittee members in attendance. We do
Great.
have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to discuss a path forward and today and hear from everybody on it real quickly. My thought is that I sent around a priority list to everybody in Excel.
You did?
Yes. Friday, Kristen did. So it lists all the different bills, not bills, or proposals or study areas. And the idea would be for each one of you to rank them. Does everybody have one of these or not?
I printed them out.
Printed out.
All right. You don't have them, I have them. The idea would be you would rank them in the next couple days. And then you rank them within the category and as a total, get them back to me, and then we'll tabulate them real quickly. We can discuss them individually today, but I don't know if there's enough time to discuss all of them. So the other thing is, and I think it's really important, I saw this in one of the documents that Caitlin sent me, that we do a pro and con on each bill if you want to comment. I know Fred already started doing that, which is great. But I would like to get individual comments on the bottom of each one of these proposals. Pro or con, I think they're all good. We have to hear all views, and we will incorporate that on the bottom of each of one of the proposals. Some of them you don't even have to comment on, some of them you do. It's up to you guys what you want to do. And that would be part of the report as well. You can or you don't have to list your name. It's up to you if you want to do that. Probably don't want to list it, but if I get that back in a couple days or beginning of next week, that would be great as well. Is that okay with you?
So my concern is we need to be having the votes on the recommendations in the actual meeting. So if we don't vote on recommendations today, then
Can we,
we would have to host another meeting to hold the vote. And I know that you're gonna be,
can we do that online?
I cannot,
Just by email? Could we do it by email?
I don't know if we
All right.
can. I think we have to have a meeting and every meeting has to be hosted in hybrid format.
That's fine. So then we will vote on each one of these today then, but either way, I like to get the pro and con. I think that's really important. And go from there. So, so if I get the pro and con and then a priority ranking, that would help us out. Do you need to have the priority ranking today as well?
I mean, yeah, if we could use the first couple of minutes of the meeting after we approve last meeting's
Minutes to do the priority?
to have everybody around the room do the priority and then, you know, based on what those results are, that's the order in which we'll go through the recommendations. That's how the other subcommittees did it. They did a priority rating prior to the meeting and then that dictated the order in which things were discussed, wordsmithed, and then ultimately
Fine.
voted.
Already. We will follow that format. So if everybody wants to, let's, let's do the minutes. Is there a motion to consider the minutes?
So moved.
Second on that motion?
Second.
Is there a discussion on the minutes or any comments from the minutes from last meeting?
I just need to abstain. I wasn't here last meeting.
Fred, do you have any comments?
No comments. I approve. I basically made the motion to approve.
All right. So if that's the case, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, there's one abstention, meaning hearing, having the votes to pass the motion passes. Let's talk about, do you guys want to take a couple minutes to eat and prioritize the different idea. Be great.
Yeah, and I mean, while everybody's doing that, I can, for the benefit of the public, give some general task force updates. So, again, this is the fourth manufactured housing subcommittee meeting and hopefully the final one. The path forward is as follows. There are two full task force meetings scheduled for the month of February. The first will be on February 6th. The second will be on February 20th. Over the course of those two meetings, our 5 subcommittee chairs will be reporting out their subcommittee's recommendations to the full task force. The point of those meetings is just to introduce the recommendations and have discussion. The full task force members will not be voting themselves on those recommendations during the February meetings. We just want to give them what the recommendations are, let them simmer on it. And then in March, we will have one, or if needed, 2 meetings, again, for the full task force. And those will be the meetings at which the full task force members will vote to approve what the subcommittees have recommended. So that is the timeline. An additional update is at 1 p.m., the House Housing Committee is going to hear HB 30. That bill would extend the reporting deadline for this task force to April 7th, 2025. That extension is at the request of the co-chairs, who in turn heard from the subcommittee chairs and subcommittee members who wanted more time. So I am actually going to leave this meeting at about 12:50 to go to the House Housing Committee to speak on the need to extend the task force deadline, and then I will come back to this meeting.
Have you heard any objection to that?
I have not heard objections from any particular person. I have heard that there are some housing advocates that are a little wary of the request to extend, and that's why I want to go in person and just make it very clear that this is literally just to give us more time so we actually have recommendations to share.
Which then would make it harder to act on any recommendations in this session.
Yes, there will be less time where HB 30 would extend the deadline by 5 weeks. But if we stuck to the original timeline, there would not have been any approved subcommittee recommendations to report out this month. But the extension is already paying off dividends. So Finance and Development Subcommittee, Construction Subcommittee, and Community Focus Group subcommittees have all had a 4th meeting, and all of them have approved several recommendations. So of course, today, this subcommittee will hopefully have their recommendations, and then on Monday, January 27th, the Regulatory and Permitting Subcommittee is having their final subcommittee meeting to approve their recommendations. Any questions about that?
So really, the purpose right now is to take a look at the recommendations in the report that Jerry drafted and decide which of those are priorities for each of us that we might be able to support.
Yes,
Correct?
yes.
And then, in a way, too, this kind of expresses preference for, I assume we don't have to rank all of them. I mean, ranking in some way also implies endorsement. I mean, there's some,
All right.
I
I
mean,
can't either.
there's some I might leave off because I don't agree with them. There's also some I might leave off because the others are more important. Or are we gonna rank from 1 to maybe 8 or 9 or however many?
The problem with the ranking 1 through 28 is that I do it on the likelihood of it being passed, not on the likelihood of, I don't expect any zoning changes to occur in any of the counties. That's not a high ranking for me. I dealt with the impact fee last week in Newcastle County and spoke about it. And it was just an absurd conversation to me, how some of the council members were addressing it in a very regressive way. So I think I'm looking at it as that what gets really passed and what really makes a big difference in someone's life. And we all have different metrics how we're doing it, which is a problem.
Yeah.
Can we just do it by 1, 2, or 3 or A, B, C, something of that nature? You have a bunch of A's, you have a bunch of B's and a bunch of C's.
between the top, what, three in each category, Jerry? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, first of all, we have to have an agreement, but assuming there is, agreement among us in some way, you know, maybe the top 3 or 4 in each category is A, and then you have 3 Bs and 3 Cs and do it that way. Is that a way to do it?
Sure.
All right.
I mean, there are certain things that I have no problem with at all. I think one of which, if you're looking for affordable housing and using manufactured housing, I think zoning basically is extremely important. Because then you can bring in whole communities, what have you, even for infill. That works. And I'm basically opposed to any extension or any additional, leased land communities where you have people investing their money in a program and having no idea where that rent is going to go. I pointed out, anything that Fannie Mae basically provided funding for under HOPA is gone as soon as the place is sold. And then rents are any place. So there's a priority, a recommendation for the state to take action, particularly in those areas. And I don't know whether there's going to be any whether we can agree to that, because that means transparency, even for vouchers. Voucher program, yeah, that's very important. But I want to make sure, as an elected official, there's transparency. Where is that money going? What is this person doing? And what is this company doing? And I basically have shown you, everybody's gotten the document from 2019 from RHP that bought in with the whole scope, with a number of communities. Hometown America bought a number of communities. RHP bought 6. I mean, all kinds of these communities. We don't even, not one single member of our legislature knows the aggregate total of money that's going out from tenants.
Or maybe what we ought to do is find out where we're in agreement on all these issues first. I'll read down the list and everybody say whether we agree or disagree. And then we can go back and rank them and do it that way, whether it's a priority or not a priority. Is that a way to do it? We just do priority and not a priority, Caitlin?
Okay, I'm gonna screen share the spreadsheet so that folks online can see what we're talking
Alright.
about.
And can you guys hear us okay? Everybody online, whoever's online?
So let's just
Yes.
start at the top
And
real quick.
Jerry, do you think it's worth somebody that's, I'll say 4, whatever that is, to give a 30-second summary?
Well,
or
I think
see if what it is?
If we get to that disagreement, yeah.
Okay.
That means, I'm not sure, for wraparound services, I don't know that anybody's gonna disagree with that. Are we all in agreement?
No.
That would be a good program?
Because we're focused on supply. I would say this is one of those parking lot sort of items that isn't driving, at least my participation in this subcommittee. This isn't about supply, preserving or expanding supply. So this isn't a priority for me.
All right, so let's debate it. One of the big problems is we have people in manufactured home communities that don't know what services are available to them. And it doesn't,
From a supply perspective, this to me goes in a category that's, if we set up that committee, these are things.
Can I finish, Mimi?
Sure.
all right. The problem is I'm trying to preserve affordable housing. And what is happening here is by not getting the right information to those people who are in lower income levels, they don't have access to the resources and they get gentrified out. We're seeing that throughout the process now. So the question is, manufactured housing has incredible gentrification pressure on it because it's the next best thing. So I want to preserve what's there, and wraparound services give us a little bit of leverage to do that.
Garrett, just
All
terms
right,
of our own priorities, I'm not dismissing that, just in terms of our priorities
All right.
for action. I'm not, this isn't a high priority for me. This is something that goes in a category of, please, let's work on this, but doesn't drive supply as much.
does anybody else disagree with that?
Well, Jerry, I remember a couple minutes ago, you commented that you were prioritizing on what's doable, kind of more pragmatic, where Mimi's kind of coming from, well, we're a task force here, we need to make just kind of bigger recommendations on higher impact types of things. And whether or not it passes at this point is not that much of a priority. That would be a very different list that the two of you would be coming up with.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how that would impact, I don't know how many of the rest of us are going to side towards how Jerry's thinking versus, towards how Mimi's thinking. And that may split us, let alone any ideological things. I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to be against, about the education thing we're discussing, but, how much should we focus on it is, I think, the issue.
Right.
Other thoughts?
Well, let's just take a vote. Who is for the wraparound services and who is not? I'm for it. Anybody else for it?
I'm for it because it's essential. You're dealing with a population who currently, most land communities that don't understand what they're getting into, don't have the education or the experience of even how to protest or how to reach out to the DOJ, Brian Ing, the ombudsman, for help. And they're frightened. They're frightened because of replication, what the community owner can do to them subtly.
What I need to say is I'm not opposed to this. If
I
I'm forced to
understand,
say
I
yes,
understand.
no,
I understand it.
it's just, it's not a priority A for me.
It's what we were given to do, which dealt with none of the laws or none of the things that have to really happen to help people who live in manufactured housing.
Right, that wasn't,
So I understand that.
that wasn't part of the shop.
I mean, that's a total issue. It's a separate task force to do that. I understand that.
And I saw something in there that I thought provided room for that. The committee to set up and legislative
Sure.
opportunities.
That's why I'm saying zoning for in-fee housing becomes to me an extremely important part if you're looking for affordable housing,
That's
or
where-
manufactured housing.
So I-
And taking care of those things become important because I'm saying, hey, the model we have for leased land housing is a gamble for anybody who's buying a home, who's investing their money and sitting in on a home because they don't know what's going to happen. And I've shown that to you. You have those documents.
So to move this along, does anybody else want to comment? I would characterize this as a low priority committee, not an agreement. Is that fair?
The committee in agreement. I'm in agreement with this, but not as a priority.
All right. Low priority. Home improvement grants. Aaron, did you want to say something?
No, I feel the same way. I feel like it's important, but I don't think that it's necessarily what we were tasked with. It doesn't do anything to increase the inventory of the homes or the availability of it. I think it falls more under education of the homeowners, which was in another one of your categories. Which, yes, it's very important, but I don't think it's helping with supply.
All right. Anybody else have anything to say? Home improvement grants.
Oh. I'm in your.
Home improvement grants, I've sent a note out on that. We have, block grants that we can provide it. I'm not certain whether we include manufactured housing.
Correct, we don't.
But if the block grant does not grant that, understanding that there's a benefit both to the homeowner and if there is a hidden benefit for the community owner. Because eventually the community owner, if that person can't pay the rent, is gonna get that house.
Wasn't there a bill last year from Senator Flexible that at the last minute, we had manufactured housing included in some grants for home improvements and energy efficiency and things like that? I think there was.
There was a bill that codified our statewide emergency repair program.
Okay,
CERT.
That was, well, I know, I think in that one, we had manufactured housing inserted at the last minute with that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
But,
I'm
so maybe this is something that builds on that.
I don't recall it, but, well, is it a low priority, high priority? What would you guys like? Just the priority? So it's low priority?
Medium priority. medium priority.
B,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
All right, it's a priority.
Expand
Give it a
it.
B. We're looking
Let's
for
folks
an
who are in it
ABC.
already.
Let's give it a B.
Built on our habitat. Mark.
Establishment of a voucher program for manufactured housing.
Again, caveats with it.
I'm confused. There was that one, and then there was the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right?
That's a different one.
My caveat is transparency.
I probably put it as, for me, probably put it as a C, useful, expand the voucher, set up a state voucher program that deals with this, but doesn't really work to expand supply, which is the one I'm beating
So it's a low priority.
for me.
I'd bump it up into at least a B. And if you compare it to the last, to the home improvement grants.
Anybody else on the committee? I have a C and a B so far.
I agree with the B.
It's about, what this really is setting up a state voucher program, right? Specific
Correct.
to manufactured housing.
I think it's actually an A. It's probably critical as life becomes more and more expensive, people get more and more stressed.
I know with Wilmington Housing Authority, some of our vouchers go to folks living in manufactured housing, so we're doing it already, so this would expand the voucher access. That's kind of why it's a B.
Well, that I would say with transparency. I see going through where that money's going. Is it going?
So what are we saying, B on it, you think?
I think it's a B.
B.
I'm just writing low, medium, or
That's
high
fine,
for folks.
voucher education, what would that be at this point? Any thoughts?
B, part of that education part. Aaron, what you were talking about in terms of that part of that education piece, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I didn't realize that you were giving us time to get this done, so I tried to scramble it in before today's meeting. And this one, the establishment of the program and then the voucher education, I had ranked them 3 and 4. So I think there were 10 in the category. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in the category. So I put them at 3 and 4. It helps with affordability. Which in, I don't know, a roundabout way increases the inventory, I guess, or the availability of affordable homes. So if there's some way to get more people into the houses that are here, yeah. But I think it's tied in with that same education so that keeps, showing up in these other categories.
So the wraparound support, I think we agreed on C. Is that where you're seeing this?
I think so. I think it's very important. I think I'm noticing that a lot of these are related to keeping people in the homes they have. And
Right.
it's very important to keep them there because I certainly don't want to increase a homelessness problem. But I don't think that it's necessarily opening a lot of doors for people to get into the homes in the first place or to have more homes available for people. So important, but not an A for sure, and iffy if it's a B.
I think it's a way to stop gentrification, and that's what we're seeing significantly in our parks now. To
True.
me, these are the most critical aspects of this category. Because we're seeing people come in and buy homes that are worth, you're seeing it, Rob, too, $5,000 or $10,000 5-7 years ago, and they're paying $40,000 and $50,000 for that same home today. They realize it's such a good deal. What a great 3-bedroom I have. So we're getting people pushed out, and now that person gets pushed out, they look for a new home, thinking they would get one, and all of a sudden they can't get it and they're homeless.
True. Yeah, that's a huge problem. When I first started selling these houses, you could get a pretty nice one, certainly livable and safe and clean, and maybe in Sussex County where I work, in the low 20,000s. It wasn't unusual to see homes at 18 or even 22,000 that were perfectly fine. And those same homes now are probably around 70,000, which blows my mind. It's just the prices have really skyrocketed on what should have been an entry level affordable house.
And do we have any information about how effective education programs are in stemming that? I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but has it been done anywhere else? Good data on this?
I have not seen it.
So I don't have any data on that particularly, but if we take the example of Demoa, when I joined, it was active, but I don't think as many people knew about it. I think we've really made some inroads into the public even knowing that we exist. And the more they know that we exist, the more they reach out and ask for help. So anytime we can educate the public to the services that are available, to the things that are available, I think there are a lot of programs out there that people just don't know about. So education's important.
So is this a medium? I'm just the scribe. But we've ranked 3 and we still have 26 more and it's already 12:30.
I need to go.
We've got to speed this up.
Anybody have any thoughts? Should be a medium.
Medium,
Yeah.
great.
Funding tie downs for enable homeowners to be eligible for voucher programs. One of the reasons they can't be eligible for them is that they don't have tie downs. There's also something else here that's going on. As we saw in California with the fire, a lot of homes don't have insurance. A lot of homes for manufactured home owners don't have insurance either. This is an inexpensive way to ensure in a big storm, we're still gonna have homes there for people who don't or can't afford insurance. So I was wrong, by the way. The cost of tie downs, at least for north of the canal or in Newcastle County, run about $1,000 to $1,500, I'm told. And if that's the case, we could do a lot of homes with $1 million, over $1 million a year. So my thought is, the more homes we have tie downs, the less potential damage we have with big storms, which gives people a way to have housing, because if they lose that home, they've lost it. They don't have insurance on it.
So you're seeing it as a preservation initiative.
Yes,
And I think it's a safety issue.
and a safety issue.
They
correct.
wouldn't abdicate the responsibility of new installations to already happen, just be one.
It'd be for the existing people.
Well,
I
I
think
see
it's a
that
high
as a
priority.
higher level priority.
I would-
Yeah.
I would see that both in terms of importance and also in likelihood that it can get passed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We've got it as high.
all right, chattel versus real property.
Hey,
It's a-
move it so that people can get financing.
Anybody have any other thoughts?
Understanding, I did send a caveat with that because it was done to create deeds. And because the bankers not willing to lend the money, we basically, those of us who surrendered our title, got the title back after we registered with Kent County. Because it was a banking lending problem. They don't want to lend it. They don't, if you don't have the ground, they're not gonna lend it. That chattel means nothing to them.
So if you can
Right.
shift it to being real property, then you have a better chance at better financing,
If
right?
you- that, yeah, but you're gonna get the resistance from the
I
lenders.
hear you. It seems like, do you think it's worth
Yeah.
taking another run at? Because when I read it, I thought, oh, yes.
This is the second bite of the apple. This
Yeah.
is Senator Ennis.
Yes.
SB 77 that passed and then was rejected. So you want to do it as a political statement and see if it'll pass, all means. I mean, I agree with you.
But outside of just passing that, there's things with lease term lengths and things like.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Traditional mortgage,
It's-
we discussed that
exactly.
recently.
Yeah.
But there's
This one,
there's a lot of other components outside of just having the ability to make it real property that you would have to kind of.
The home has to have a permanent foundation. There's a whole slug of
Yes.
different things, but you still can have it and it makes a difference.
Yes, and yes, all
So-
of that.
Let's,
the
let's move
lenders,
on. Since we have so many, let's move on. 10-year abatement on new manufactured homeowners with incomes less than 40%.
And guys, I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting. I have absolutely no knowledge of this, whether it's good, bad, and just,
This is a new one.
um,
So let me explain taxes now. Many homeowners do not pay their taxes to begin with, real estate taxes. In Newcastle County, it's not uncommon to have that continuously. They never repossess the homes. It's chattel, not real property anyway, questionable whether you can tax it, but whatever. So the idea would be somebody with an income less than 40% would receive a 10-year abatement and not even have to pay the real estate taxes for a new homeowner. That would also be for any, in a new park if it was built too.
I have no context for this. I'm so uncomfortable looking at this for the first time and trying to vote on it.
Basically, if you're talking about a in-fee housing program, the answer is this would be valuable. It is not valuable now because most of the communities pay, people in manufactured housing pay an annual fee because for services, they don't pay a property tax.
No, they, in Newcastle County, we pay property taxes.
I
I think they do
I
too.
pay a property
Yeah.
tax, but most of them do not.
No,
Most of them have an annual fee that goes to that is collected by the community owner. Those who have property taxes, and I'm one who has a property tax that gets assessed every 5 years. And most do not.
well, most,
So you're talking about-
most maybe for Kent County, not for Sussex and Newcastle. We pay property taxes, renters pay property tax on their home. A lot of renters don't pay the tax. It's accumulated. It's very cumbersome. The state doesn't repossess it to begin with, but either way, this is for somebody making less than 40% median income. They would get their tax abated for 10 years to entice people who need to be subsidized in that income level.
Sure, just practically speaking, what, I guess, what percentage of people would actually be able to buy a home at that income level? Practically, like, what, are we talking about 8 people or 8,000 people or 80,000?
No, we're probably, in Newcastle County, you're probably talking about, probably about 20% of the 30% of the people coming in.
Okay, that's a material,
Yeah.
okay.
It is material.
Yep.
And it's usually in the, less developed parks that may have, stone roads, the smaller parks.
Sure. Fair enough.
Sorry, guys, but for me, this is one of these things where it's like, I feel like I'm missing, like, this is a further research and investigation kind of.
That's fine.
category, Not even an ABC. It's not a no. I don't know enough about it. You know, and how it fits with other things and what impact
That's
it
fine.
has. Okay, that's, again, that's. my point.
That's your voice. Anybody else have comments? Rob, what's your thought as a priority?
I mean, down in Sussex, I don't know how many people would be in that, pool, so it'd be very different.
Because you have second home owners.
So,
Correct.
I personally believe this is a medium priority. So,
Put it in medium, and I don't have an objection. I don't have an objection to it. It's a medium.
With that,
I just like to know.
a new manufactured homeowner education, what I envision here is something we're actually trying to start up at Rabel, where when you would sign your lease, you would see a 10-minute video providing information about what your responsibilities are, what the responsibilities are for the homeowner, and information about if you should get eviction, where you can reach out for help. It's a really simple thing, not complicated, but I think it's important for new homeowners, and also if there's a new park. Because a lot of people just don't know what to do.
And who would be responsible for creating it and showing that?
The
seller?
either no, it'd be either the DOJ or somebody of that nature.
This was actually proposed in the legislature a couple.
I
of
know,
years
I
ago
did it.
For education.
Yeah, I did it.
And I would say absolutely the more education you have for people coming into it, the better everybody's going to be. And so those two educational programs are, I think, essential, and I would list it as an A. And it should be passable.
And I would say it wouldn't only be people in mobile home communities, manufactured housing communities. It should be available for individual property owners who put a manufactured house on their site, all of that.
Yeah.
Right, not just the community.
No, I'd say it would be for anybody who's in a lease. I want to do it for this and for residential leasing too. It'd be for anybody who's in a lease in the state of Delaware. It doesn't say it there, but that's my goal, because I did it for the non-mobile home parks as well. Receivership chancery court, this is sort of a high priority. Receivership and chancery court, this is actually a current law, right? A current proposed change in the law. We're gonna be addressing it, but basically we want to split. I think it's either 50 or 25 unit parks would still be in JP court. Anything above 50 or 25 would be in chancery court because of the value. Chancery court deals with bigger dollar values where JP court does not. But we also need that in context with the property condition report. So there's actually a law going through now. To me, it's a high priority. But if you want to put medium, I understand that.
Go high.
Go high?
Yeah.
Because it's a better
Right,
venue
yeah.
for.
Yes,
Is that what it is?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Again, outside of my realm of knowledge.
Aaron?
Yeah, I had it number 2 on my list out of the choices, so high priority.
Receivership, pardon me, solar farm subsidization of manufactured home residents. So the idea is here that there are open space lands within mobile home parks. And given that mobile home parks sometimes are in the rural areas, maybe we can get solar platforms for these parks as a community, right, adjacent or within the parks. And there's been no thought of that. So it's just something to think about in the future.
Gary, I want to say, I think it's a cool idea to help people think that way. For me, in terms of supply, it's a C, but it's a cool idea.
So
How do we help stimulate that?
any other thoughts on that?
I would say low priority.
All right. First time home buyer program for manufactured home buyers. We don't have that now. I don't think they're accessible into the state's program from what I remember. So we would somehow be involved in first time home buyer program for manufactured home. I think that's a high priority.
It's a high priority, but not in leased land homes. And I quoted, basically, I gave you a caveat from the program that DSHA had once upon a time, where they did have that for people to help train them, get into jobs, and what have you. And one of the things was that they would be able to buy a home. As soon as there is a glitch somewhere along the line and they lose that home, they lose whatever equity they have built up. Home gets taken away from them, and they're back where they started from. So if it's in fee, the answer is yes. There's no reason.
I think it should be eligible for both personally.
So in Sussex County, the first time home buyers program for in fee homes is they waive their half of the transfer tax. That's all it is. So in my head, that's what I was thinking here. You will waive.
No, I think they would get a grant like anybody else.
You're extending that beyond. I was just assuming
Yeah.
you'd waive the transfer. fee.
No, that could be the county level, but at the state level, there would be some type of subsidization.
It would, if you did that, then you encourage the use of manufactured homes in fee in communities, then you're going to expand the use of manufactured homes, which are affordable because it's less expensive to have a home. To bring it in from the factory.
Question, this is an actual
Not
question.
but
for-
opposed to on leased land.
Are manufactured houses either on leased land or owned land currently included in the first time home buyer program?
I would have to check with our finance folks.
If they are,
They're not included in any.
I don't believe so.
then they should be
Yeah.
included. I agree with that. And it should be all non-stick built housing, whether it's manufactured, modular, panelized. You shouldn't discriminate. based on
Is it because
type of home.
Well, it could be because of the foundation types. It could be a whole slug of things, but we have to make sure it's conforming to whatever grants we're getting from the federal government
Yes.
and so on. So I don't think it's,
Well, they
The
don't
state
qualify
funds,
for
they
the,
I agree, but the first thing is we gotta get the idea on the table. Let's
Right.
move on to,
So I'm supportive.
go ahead.
One other
Steve.
question, what would be the prospect of bundling that last one, the first time buyers program with like the new manufactured homeowner education? Seems like there would be some overlap there or the same or a similar.
Same thing as the Habitat program. Yeah, I would agree.
it's a great idea.
What's the button with?
So is this a high priority?
The new manufactured homeowner education.
To me, it's a medium priority, but
Okay, so first time buyers medium.
landowner education, That's a high priority, period. Next category,
I just have to find it.
that's 1.14. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Landlord essential services. I tried to get this bill passed last year. It didn't go anywhere, but I think there's interest this year. Be a property condition report produced once every 10 years minimum, a septic and water systems report if it's private, once every 5 years. I think it's really important to do that, and it's a high priority.
I agree. The state does a
I know
nice
you do.
job of basically following up on these type of things through Generac, and it basically need to put it in law to have the force of law to do this, make the state actually do it. We have code inspectors in the city. You call out a code inspector, and they can enforce certain things based on what our code calls for. State doesn't do the job. That would help very seriously for the health and the safety of all communities.
Question for you guys, is it justice or is it DSHA? I don't know. It's DSHA because it's like the old neighborhood reinvestment services. It gives the data so that funders can come in and assist in meeting the
For what's,
deficiencies.
for what?
Landowner must submit a report to DOJ. I'm wondering, is it, this is real.
No, it should be DOJ.
Or DSHA?
No,
because,
no, CSHA, no,
The
thank you.
force of law.
Yeah,
We had a community owner who had nitrates in the water, and they could not get her to basically fix the problem.
So you need the gap.
And eventually it resulted in a change in the law that became rent justification. But I can give you the story on that.
I'm good, I'm good.
let's get to the fireworks one.
That
first.
basically becomes extremely.
Before Kaylin goes, let's get the fireworks. 112, grandfathering, existing manufacturer homeowners, so current rent control structure requirement and rental assistance. That is, the current people in the parks would be grandfathered in, they would accept it. Anybody new would be exempt from it. Otherwise, we're not gonna, eventually manufactured housing communities are just gonna continue to be sold off or closed down.
I'm completely uncomfortable with
Or
making
concur.
recommendations pro or against rent control. That's what this is, basically. It's a difference of opinion on the committee as to whether you support or do not support rent control going
Well,
forward.
basically, if the question is, what you're saying is you can have the new people coming in are going to attract a higher income group of people.
That's your goal.
It's still a gamble because you don't know what's going to happen. That's why I'm opposed to any new lease land community coming in,
Why?
simply because you don't know what that rent is going to be regardless of what your income is going to be. It's not, and it basically, there's a separation now between the low income and fixed income people. And you're talking about that in earlier on here, but what you have is as soon as the second buyer of that community, whatever you had goes out because they're paying a second mortgage. They're paying off that loan for the first developer and they're paying off the loan for the second developer.
What does that have to do with the new community?
Because you can't stop the person, you can't stop a community owner from selling. And if they sell, then the tenants are now paying off a new loan. There's a new loan that's gonna be involved. You can't say, here comes a new community and that community owner, once he's in and established and decides he wants to get out, private equity or anybody can come in and buy that.
If I want to build a new community, you're saying I can't build it without rent control?
I'm saying that if you do it, I think that that's a gamble. It's a gamble for anybody who moves into a lease land community.
But if you disclose it, isn't that okay?
It's not a question of disclosing. As soon as you have it. I mean, I basically provided the information for you. Here it is. You had the first developer, then you had a second developer. And what do you have? Basically, the actual expenses. Then you have the double billing charge, $669,354. equal to $253 dollars per month. Now, that was from the second guy. That's from RHP. So you can't stop that from happening ever. Because they can sell that and 3 times over. And each time it's sold, the tenants now pay the new bill for the new loan off. So that's why I'm opposed to having new lease land communities. You can't stop that. You can say, if I sell it, you're gonna pay, you're gonna have to wind up paying a hell of a lot more. What, are you gonna sell it? Well, yeah, I'm not gonna sell it, and he sell it. You can't stop a community owner from selling the property regardless.
So your push would be toward communities and lots that are not leased, right?
I'm all for in manufactured homes in fee.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. That there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're talking about protecting lease land community owners, all of this goes towards the basis of protecting their industry and the income. And this is the proof of what can happen. There it is. Send it to everybody.
Isn't this question narrower though? This question to me is a little more narrow than just about the current, not about future lease land, but current ones being grandfathered into the current rent control regime,
I don't
right?
have a problem with that,
Okay, well, I think.
but I have a problem with the new ones coming in.
Sure. No, understood, but I think that with this, and correct me if I'm wrong, unless I'm misunderstanding, but this one is directed at the current lease land.
Correct.
And whether.
Correct.
So to me, I think that, and I appreciate the comments in the discussion, but with respect to this specific recommendation, if we're in agreement with, all right, they're gonna be grandfathered into the current regime, I think I would like that, we should try to keep the discussion.
Okay,
at
so
that point.
I guess now so this offers a certain set of protections for current homeowners, and what doesn't get it, or what's implicit here is then subsequent homeowners would not fall under this rent.
Correct.
And that's still bad. Because the current people coming in are still gonna be subject, unless that is a carryover with any new owner coming in, they have to stay with what is current at the time.
So
They might go.
think of it this way. We have to pick a poison here. The poison we have now is declining manufactured capacity in the state. We've lost 6,800 spaces in the last decade or decade and a half. We want to stop that from continuing on. We also have, Robert and I experienced this, when 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I got involved, it was mostly all local people owning it. Now, a lot of the parks are owned by nationals. The reason that happened is generational changes, people fed up with all the regulations we have, and so on. So how do we stop that from occurring or slowing down? One of the big problems we have is rent control and, or rent justification, whatever you want to call it. And so the idea is that we'll protect Fred and anybody else who in today's world lives in a manufactured home community. But if you come in new, you don't get the same protections.
That means that what is in 713 about the transfer of leases goes out the door. Because right now it's not being respected at all by RHP. That doesn't stop anything, and that does not help.
We're working on that, right?
That does not help affordable housing. That's the point. Saying you want affordable housing. Okay, my rent now is in the $700 range. New people coming in, they're not permitting the transfer of leases. That if I had, they would get my lease at least for the rest of the annual term. And then at that point, it should pick up with what is current.
So
in law. But what's happening is RHP is saying, no, you're now gonna pay $850. So anybody new coming into the process is getting $850. You're wiping out everything in terms of 713. and making it legal for them to say, I want $1,000. That's not affordable, except for people who have the higher income. So the gap is growing from the people who are fixed incomes and low incomes.
Just want to comment on the time. We got about 30 minutes left and we're about halfway through.
I thought we had 2 o'clock.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So,
But yeah, I think.
I'm gonna put my developer's hat on for a minute. The way we look at this is basically on rates of return, nothing more than that. So if I've closed down 4 parks since I've been in the industry, and potentially I'm gonna do a 5th, and have 9 communities we own. And the reason we close them down is because that community doesn't generate a comparable rate of return of what I can look at in my universe of building capabilities. So we need, if we keep degrading rates of return, remember, we're private capital. We're not getting any subsidization from anybody, and we're trying to provide affordable housing. If we can't keep our rates of return in some type of balance with alternate assets, you could have closure of parks, and we have closure of parks. Greg's the expert on it here. We get closure of parks continually in the state. And we want to stop that. And what we're doing here is allowing people who sell their units to go to market or closer to market, whatever that is. And that helps actually subsidize the people that are at the getting the break on the rent. And if we don't do that, we're gonna see more closure of parks. Just imagine the beach area for the communities that are way, way below market, what that land's worth and what they're potentially gonna do.
Isn't that, Jared, I'm sorry, but isn't that the worry about shifting things out of a rent controlled environment, that the housing that's currently affordable, I'm trying to understand, housing that's currently affordable along the shoreline, if it weren't subject to some rent justification, would, based on one of your graphics in your report, would more likely be taken by folks in the much higher income category. So if we losing the affordable.
In the beach areas, you're not seeing any affordable housing being maintained at all. It's all being gentrified out.
I'm thinking rent control for existing.
This,
It does for existing, but for new, it doesn't.
You made a really good point in your email this morning about general objectives for the legislature as they proceeded. And this to me is a good discussion for them to be balancing.
I
As
mean,
opposed to
the-
specifics
yeah, I
of
mean-
no rent control.
The dilemma is giving, I guess, incoming homeowners, access to lower to more affordable rents. But then with the threat that the management is gonna be more hostile to affordable housing needs. Or basically having, I mean, I guess I see it as hitting interests of developers again, and you have interests of homeowners, and those are kind of clashing here.
No question, but it's new homeowners, not existing
Right.
homeowners.
But even with that, how do we make it an affordable resource?
It's not. You've lost it as an affordable resource because they're looking for the bottom line. I want more. I
If you
expect,
don't-
I expect more.
Affordable housing, one characteristic of it needs to be subsidized. That's the nature of it, all right? And we're not getting any subsidization at all. We actually have a rental assistance program. We're the only housing type, I know, almost in America that has its own rental assistance program. So we have all these demands, and yet do you really think we're going to exist in the long term if we're not allowed to go to market? If we can't go to market over time, we end up converting to something else, and that's been consistent in the data, consistent in my experience.
And on top of it too, we're only looking at one part of the cost. I mean, when a new homeowner's coming in, they're gonna buy, if the rent's way undervalued, they're gonna pay a lot more to get control of the house. So that house is gonna be sold for way more just when the rent's below market. We've had people move in our communities and on waterfront lots pay 150, 250,000, never move in the house, tear it down, and put a new one on there just to get control of the lot. So, you know, when the rent's really cheap and below market, that's what happens. So I mean, when you can only control one side of the price. I mean, there was a couple of articles, academic research that Fred sent around originally that showed just that. Like, rent control is great for the people that are there at the time, but it doesn't preserve any affordable housing because you know, you're only controlling one side of the equation.
Well, when you have rent control, you shift equity from the landowner to the homeowner.
Yeah.
That's all you're
I'm
doing,
not a real estate developer, I'm not affordable housing.
That,
but that's all you're doing.
For me, it's just, I think that rent control provisions should be extended to everyone who's currently in manufactured housing. That makes sense to me. I'm just not sure about the new communities.
but they don't even show the books. They want to show the books, you can't see what they're talking about. There are places in New Jersey townships that say you have to have a quarterly report. Basically, leased land is no longer affordable housing. You're wiping it off because there's no control. The people who are coming in who pay more, and even then, they're going to be a little bit on a roller skate, depending upon how much wealth they have. Because if the park is sold, you're going to now have
But
a new
There's also
loan
a
to pay
shift
off.
demographically, and that is, we're now becoming moderately priced housing, not sub-market demographic low income housing. And that's one of the things going on, and we're not causing that shift. It's the marketplace is, because the lower economic demographics can't afford to get into that housing segment anymore. And the moderately priced housing segment can't afford to buy a house where they used to, so they're coming to manufactured housing.
Which is still more affordable because of construction benefits and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Cost.
And so this shift that's going on is revitalizing manufactured home communities, essentially.
So backing up, just one thought, which is, so are we taking them separately, A112, extending provisions of protection to everyone who's currently
Yes,
renting a mobile home?
yes, that's what they're saying.
Is that-
You're still going to have that thing, but anybody coming in, you're removing transfer of leases. Because they're saying anybody coming in now, the heirs have no right to continue on.
I'm just trying to separate the two. So one is 12, one is 13. So, because I know,
I think Aaron is trying to do
oh,
it.
I'm so sorry. Didn't need to turn my back to you.
Aaron, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you have comments? I thought I saw your audio on.
Oh, no. I'm just listening to the conversation and thinking, RHP is the one that always comes to mind because they'll do anything they can to not transfer a rent. And with every person, it's kind of like the 99-year leases that existed in Angola Beach and Estates. I think when I first started working, there were maybe 10 of them left. And now I think they're down to maybe 3 or 4. But once those are gone, they're gone. So that inventory of affordability is gone. And that's just allowing for or creating or exacerbating the gentrification of these communities because that piece of affordable inventory, rather than transferring, just disappears. And so
what you're
then,
saying is what 12 you're supportive of. That's a high priority for you. Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, say again.
We're talking about title A1.12, grandfathering existing manufactured.
Yep.
So that's a high priority for you.
It would be nice if you could grandfather them from any legislation or whatever that would cause them to pay more and more and more rent. But grandfathering them in and then making their rent non-transferable is just eliminating their piece of affordable housing from future.
So you would expand
inventory.
this proposal, right?
I don't, yeah, it would need, I like the idea of it. It needs to be worked on and details kind of figured out because at face value, I like it until I start digging into it.
Can I jump in for a moment?
Yeah.
I feel like this group is really good at really healthy debate. We have a lot of really important topics that need to be addressed. But I feel like we just spent about 20 minutes on that
Let's
last
move on.
one.
And this was actually an item we put in the parking lot, our first meeting.
Well, and I was gonna say, very simply put, the charge is to create a higher production of affordable housing, and I think that's getting lost a little bit in some of these.
So,
Yeah.
well, anyway, what would you consider this, a high priority, low priority?
Or something that goes in a different category
I don't think it answers the question
for
directly,
supply generation.
if that makes, not that it's a low priority, but as far as what the charge is.
Well, we
does it
want
give
to,
more affordable housing?
I think the charge is also to protect, for manufactured housing, unlike any other housing, we have a loss of housing, so how are we gonna protect it out there? We have had no new manufactured housing, and unless rent control is taken away, we're not gonna see any, so it's just a matter of us protecting what's out there.
We're trying to build it into.
Yeah, and so that's what I want to be careful of.
I think if we rank ones like that high, we have to be cognizant to also rank some of the ones in the developer section high, like they have to both be included. We can't prioritize saving the existing housing stock over building if we're gonna answer the question we've been tasked with. If that, and that's my opinion. I just wanted to bring that up in case
All right,
anyone else looked at it that way.
Excuse me, I didn't know
I
your name.
agree with that.
Vanessa
I'm
Collin.
sorry?
Vanessa Collin, I'm a DSHI.
Hi. I would suggest we set this down and keep moving, and we'll come back to this toward the end, because you're right, we spend a lot of time on it, we're not.
well, I think, what type of priority I'll be get a sense for.
Lower.
This isn't necessarily a production.
112, I would say, is
Or if-
important. I would give it an A.
Yeah.
I would give it an F for 113. So,
Well, I think 113, you're not gonna see new communities unless you do, see, 113 is the crux of it, unless you get rid of the subject to the current laws, you're not gonna see any new communities.
Again, I'm not suggesting anything other than set this down for now, and let's keep moving.
All right, that's fine, you
Yeah.
can do that,
I think it should be discarded. I just think we've spent a lot of time on it and
we need to come back to 113 though, because that's the crux of the whole issue.
yeah, but that should be coupled, I think, with some of the developing.
That's fine, that's fine, so let's do land and community owners education program.
that's an A for me.
What do you guys say?
You're not against it.
Not against, but it's education, it's C, not, it's a priority, but it's a lower priority because it doesn't drive supply.
To me, it's a B, it's a
Yeah.
priority.
I had it as
Tax
a 4.
credits on subsidization of renters who are below 40% median income. Again, that's sustaining the existing marketplace. That's a really high priority for me.
So that's basically offering landowners.
Correct,
A rebate for the hit they take.
correct.
I think
To me, that's a high priority. What about, let's go to zoning regulations of manufactured home communities.
I'm saying A, important. Like
I-
working for expansion. Those three
5? Oh, yeah, A.
for-
And Aaron, I heard you also, right?
Yeah, at 1.05 zoning, I had it as number 1 in that category.
Yep.
Zoning regulations of manufactured home community infill,
A.
Yeah, that was number 2.
Yeah, for me too.
permit and engineering plan in lieu of zoning plan in order to develop new manufactured housing communities.
Number 3.
To me, that's an A as a developer.
I don't understand what it means.
Right now,
Are they cutting out public process with this? I can't.
you're having one less step.
I think you're gonna run into opposition from.
Everywhere.
But see, I'm a planner. This makes me really uncomfortable.
Why?
Here's the thing, as right, you can just do your engineering plan, no
Correct,
process.
correct. How are you gonna get affordable housing?
The
There needs
problem
to be
is,
Public process.
The problem is the public doesn't want it anywhere.
I think you could expand this because it's probably county specific, like in Sussex, there's an affordable housing, there's a bunch of steps, if you do.
We don't
You
have
can
that
get
anywhere
bump ups
else.
to the head of the line in zoning and all kinds of things. But manufactured housing isn't one of those items. It's basically a subdivision or a rental.
Correct.
Of a stick-built home or something. Then if you include a certain amount in your project, then that project's bumped to the front of the line. So
Being
there's,
bumped to the front of the line, bumped to the front of the line versus having the inability to get through the process is something different.
correct, but I mean, the line right now in Sussex is 2 years long. So there's a big deal if you can go to the front.
I understand that, but what I'm trying to say is in
And there's a lot of
Newcastle,
expedited things with. that,
yeah,
so.
in Newcastle County, I'm doing a tiny home project. I'm in my 4th year of it.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of people against it. People don't want to see any type of housing anywhere that has anything to do with affordability or people that could take vouchers. So unless the government is going to have the courage to allow us to develop housing as a matter of right, you're not going to get affordable housing. You're not going to get it below the canal. You're going to not going to get it above the canal. That's a fact.
I'm hearing two different things. One is there's a process in Sussex that could be modified to incorporate manufactured housing as well.
Just to expedite it.
And maybe the recommendation is a similar approach in the other
I'm
counties,
just thinking,
as opposed to stepping entirely outside the public process.
You're not, there's still public process. You would still go to the planning board. What do you fear about, what's the matter with affordable housing? So what's the problem with that?
The state requires a 10-year plan on terms of zoning. And basically, you're not gonna, I don't believe you're gonna get it through. You have local opposition, and that's one of the problems. Not in my backyard. There's certain things that you're not gonna get. So you better go through the zoning process to make it legal. And that, even though that would cut a step for both of these things, that and traffic would cut a step, you are gonna get, pushback, locally, county-wise, municipalities who basically are represented by people like me, who hear from people who say, no. And so you have to fight through that. Get the zoning change, that makes it legal, then you can move into it just like everybody else. You're trying to speed up the process, you're not gonna get it through. It's gonna be fought.
So our two previous ones that were dealt with the zoning changes, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which is,
Or you can zoning changes, then it becomes legal, and you go through the zoning process.
so what are you saying in this? You have an engineering plan that you submit straight to Public Works and it doesn't get reviewed by planning commission or any other body?
All plans have to go through the planning board of Newcastle County, same thing in Kent.
For me, an engineering plan, based on the multiple other states I've worked, doesn't.
Right, but the difference is an engineering plan isn't up for a political vote in the sense that we don't want the zoning here. There's no one, I've done mobile home zonings, and the amount of, I don't want to use the word violence, but the amount of reaction you get from people when you do a mobile home park is immense. And and the reason it stopped was it's impossible to get them through.
Hey, Jerry.
This question. So backing up, so if we're talking about, let's get manufactured housing or non-stick built housing in every zone, right?
Yes,
Totally supportive of that, right? Let's remove the discrimination from the use of non-stick built properties. Absolutely. What does an engineering plan versus a zoning plan?
it's two
Right.
steps. Usually you have a zoning plan first that gives you the legal entitlement to put the development there, and then you do the engineering plan. I'm taking the entitlement process for the legal right to put mobile homes there away. We have a separate category for manufactured housing. It's treated as a stepchild. I want to get rid of that and just say, doesn't matter the zoning type, you can put a mobile home plan. Fact is, we're only going to get 4 to 5 per acre. We're not talking about dense housing at the beginning.
So you're talking about not having to do a rezoning.
Correct.
I'm fine with that because I'm already supportive of the previous two. Engineering plans for me go straight to Public Works with no planning board review, no
That's fine.
opportunity to say design guidelines.
That's all we're saying.
But we want the design, we were offering elsewhere design guidelines, right?
Correct. That's the, one of them in here. That's correct. There's design guidelines.
So saying I'm supportive of changing the zoning categories.
All right.
To permit it everywhere and then facilitating the process as long as there's the opportunity for the public to say that we need architectural consistency, we need infrastructure consistency, we need those things.
Well, that's the zoning regulations of manufactured home communities. 105, I think, does that.
yeah, and I would, just looking at the detail of what you've written a while ago, I would include that instead of just the community septic and private water, it ought to have public utilities, water and so.
All right.
Instead, I think, yeah, adding community septics in there, I think public water and sewer makes sense.
Oh, no, well, no, but because the public, if you read it carefully, the public water, private water and sewer in there has to be government.
It says community septics.
Right, but I'm just saying,
I'm just saying.
I'm trying to get that code change in
Yeah.
the state.
Like Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna ask, what part of the zoning plan did you want to get rid of? But you clarified that there's zoning and engineering, the legal entitlement is the problem. And so, yeah, just eliminating the rezoning that would be required so that it's not treated like the stepchild.
Correct.
Yep, thank you.
All right, at least in Newcastle County, and I know in Sussex, the idea of traffic impact studies for these communities would be removed. If you were doing at least 20% affordable housing in them.
Is that true for other affordable housing? Didn't
Go ahead.
I can't talk. So are other affordable housing?
No. No,
Accepted from this?
No.
This seems like sort of a universal affordable housing issue, a potential incentive.
so right now, the way we're stopping affordable housing in Newcastle County is that you have to scope from your site for a traffic impact study 3 intersections away above the canal, as well as probably on the east side of one down in Sussex.
Right.
The likelihood of you scoping 3 intersections away and having them a D level service or better, probability is 0. It just doesn't exist. So nobody can build anything of any density affordable above the canal, and they've done that on purpose.
So I'm thinking, this isn't just about manufactured housing or non-stick built housing. This is an affordable housing supply recommendation that either LOS get changed or
Right, but we're working on that.
public sector organizations figure out how to be responsible for funding the traffic improvements that support affordable housing. I mean, this is important.
We all grow up and say we're gonna wait 5 more minutes at a traffic light, not invest $10 million or $15 million.
I did that once or twice.
Well, maybe you need to grow up.
There's a political aspect of it that says
I'm good.
DelDOT does these studies. And DelDOT does these studies. If you don't get it, I know it's sitting in council meetings, you better have that if you want to get it passed. And so that's a no. I mean, it's not going to pass local opposition from the members of the council.
So I'd love to see this say something, they just cut you off, sorry, because I just had to get this thought out. I'd love to see this say something like traffic impact for level of service issues and other infrastructure related things being picked up by other public agencies for funding to support development of affordable housing, including manufactured housing. To me, that's outside of the scope.
I don't wanna, yeah, and the problem with that is it's, so the issue is, we're not having the problem so much. At least Robert's having the same problem I have. We're not having the problem so much of bringing utilities to the site as the expense. It's that we're being forced to relocate utilities by DelDOT, which normally 10 years ago wouldn't have been relocated. And the cost of that is hundreds, if not millions of dollars now. And for really not really good reasons. So we're dialoguing with people about that now, but it's years away to get corrected. That's a bigger problem.
Yes, huge, and that's affecting affordability across the state.
Okay, right. Let's keep moving on. So is that a high priority, 106?
In the context of other potential public accommodations to support affordable housing, not so much freestanding.
So voluntary school assessments, I actually sued the state years ago to try to get them to make a progressive rather than regressive tax. Right now you pay a single fee, no matter how many bedrooms you have in the house. And the issue is for manufactured housing, they don't really change it. If it's cheap enough, they'll say, well, you can pay 5% of the cost. Well, if you have $1 million home, that's effectively 1.5% of the cost in North Wilmington. If you had a manufactured home, at $70,000, it would be 5% of the cost. There's a problem there. So I would say if you are buying a manufactured home, you should be exempt from voluntary school assessment. Any thoughts on that or whatever?
I don't know, we don't have that feed in. So.
Yeah, it's a Newcastle County lead. Any thoughts with anybody? Oh, then, Thursday, I'll just say high priority. Anybody have an objection to that?
Help me out a little bit. So it's a voluntary fee.
It's not about, well, it's a voluntary, they raise it as a voluntary fee, because if you decide not to pay it, you don't get your school exemption and you can't build your house.
Voluntary.
Yes, it is. That's what's voluntary about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a choice, right? Don't do it.
Yeah.
Again, this feels like
All right.
mobile manufactured housing, but also all affordable housing, right? It falls in, Alex, I'm telling this to you because you're responsible for all the committees, right? Or at least involved in them all. Some of these things are way outside the extent of mobile homes, right? And I hope you guys can carry this stuff into the broader report. Because the things Jerry's raising, the things Robert's supporting, they affect affordable housing throughout the state.
So next one, let's run through these. Financial advisor for acquisition for communities of homeowners. I think that's a high priority.
I would say yes, absolutely necessary because the homeowners do not have the expertise.
So what do you want to do for 101, Fred? Is that a high priority or low priority or not?
Very low. I'm saying no, because you get, and I basically, what
That's fine.
I sent to you says that the state is in a bidding process using taxpayers' money to up the cost of a community that's going to be sold. And that you can't use taxpayers' money for that purpose.
Next would be manufactured housing committee, advisory committee. I think that's a high priority. Meet a couple times a year.
This is a legislative committee.
No, legislative committee is different. I want a permanent committee that would have Robert or me on it, would have somebody from rental communities, would have DOJ, would have DENREC, have all the people there. There used to be a committee in Newcastle County when we used to do subdivision plans back in the 80s and 90s called TAC. It was an advisory committee. And it reviewed all the plants, but they had the fire marshal there and everybody else. And it was like a great committee because you learned a lot and you had interaction with the people there. We don't have that anymore. So we just get a letter back and we can't learn anything.
I think it's a great idea.
I think the legislative committee and advisory committee are both high priorities. There's an article I sent you guys on Malaysia and they came about, they created private-public partnerships using government land and things like that for affordable housing. I think this is a really important priority. So one way for Fred not feel that people from New Parcel could get ripped off. If the land's free to a developer and he goes and enters a contract that can only lift rents at a certain percentage a year, that would be an interesting way to build new mobile home parks. Just an idea. And I'm seeing private partner lifted all around the country. I think we need to look at that from a perceptual point of view, as well as for building mobile home parks. So we need to get a private-public partnership for manufactured housing with the MOA and First State Manufactured and the state of Delaware together to change the perception of manufactured housing. And then a public-private partnership to expand manufactured housing to see if we can get some public land, put some mobile home parks on, but with restrictions with rent.
Basically, that and also for the homeless.
Yeah,
Without question.
Homeless is a different thing.
Being able to get that so that you can have.
high priority.
services, High priority.
The last one,
With basically with the, other services that the homeless basically need, that would help the homeless, but having that for manufactured housing available to do so, yeah.
the last one is something I've seen around the country now. So for habitability standards, if you have a bathroom that works and it can be connected, if you have a kitchen, refrigerator, basic requirement for habitation, you can use an RV in different jurisdictions for living in. And I'm seeing it more and more when I bike and travel around the West. So the question is, do we want to actually look at that as an alternate way of having affordable housing? It's be very inexpensive to have.
Can I speak to that real quick, since I'm a park metal manufacturer?
I know that.
And say we build them, and mostly recently in Ashland, North Carolina, so we have a big project out there where they've pursued an RVIA certified park model, it's 400 square foot. It's still technically an RV to solve the housing issue out there, because obviously there was tens of thousands of homes wiped out by the floods out there. So there, Florida, Virginia, and New Jersey have all pursued the RV tag, and there's some restrictions around that. It's not like just a pop-up camper.
Correct.
You know, it's built to the same electrical code that would be for a regular house, and there's other requirements.
Was there any HUD for that?
No, so that's the reason I think it's important, is because I'm not a HUD manufacturer,
All right.
which is what you guys.
Right.
Right, and for a variety of reasons, I'm not, I can't compete with Clayton and other things, but I think what it would do is expand the ability of people to, produce, housing beyond HUD manufacturers. So you know, specifically we built it in Georgetown, and we're sending them all over, you know, the country, and it's really answering the mail on a lot of these. So it's still, they're built to a standard. And again, it's not just a regular like fifth wheel trailer. It is built to an electrical code standard, a bunch of other things, to allow for more full-time living, and it does address that issue. So I think it's worth looking at. And again, in Henderson County in North Carolina, we're sending a whole bunch down there to give people places to live. Similarly in Florida, and then again, we've done a big project in Jersey and in Virginia that have allowed it, where local counties have said, hey, you know, we need something, this answers the mail, and they've allowed that to happen. So it's worth looking at. There's some grandfathered lots that allow for both RV and HUD in the same spot. My name is but that's really, it's got to be an older park that allows that. So I think it's worth looking at. We've been effectively doing it in other places. You know, we have the ability to do it, and, you know, somewhat selfishly, having a Delaware manufacturer help answer the kind of crisis that's happening, because there was a natural disaster, and we're able to push things out. And I personally feel that the affordable housing thing is a crisis as well. It's not a natural disaster, but it's a major problem. And if we can find alternative avenues to address that issue, I think it's worth looking at. And again, there's, as Jerry said, around the country, people have been effectively deploying RVs essentially as a.
Craig, you were gonna say something?
Yes, in chapter 70, where it says exemptions under 7004, it says except for homes defined as manufactured homes in section 7003 of chapter 70, the rental ground upon which a recreational vehicle is placed, including facilities or utilities thereon, is exempt from the requirements of these subchapters. So I think if you're going to consider RVs, you would have to consider what the chapter.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. We've been trying to carve RVs out of it on purpose. And now I think we need to look at it again to look at this as an alternate housing type.
Yes.
And I'm seeing it all in the middle of nowhere places in the West, and seeing it in cities. And I've been actually sort of shocked how this is becoming a more accepted housing type, maybe not in the East, but through the Midwest and West, as a way of.
One of the neat things I've been through his plan a couple times, and it's, you know, the houses, you can make them match whatever the existing community looks like. It's pretty neat how they look like just a little teeny house, but you can kind of skin them however you want, and it's great, but you really can't use them many places now.
And I want to.
I never got an invitation to those plans.
You're welcome anytime. And I would encourage anybody that wants to come, I'm happy to give you a tour. And I think that it really would pull the veil off of your eyes in terms of how we build them. So I build modular houses too. So, but the challenge with modular is that I need an engineer's stamp drawing, you know, I had to add a screen door, and it cost me $5,000 in 6 weeks of time just to get a new drawing with a screen door instead of 2 windows. And so the nice part about the ANSI standard or the RV standard is that I can move things so long as, you know, we still have monthly inspections, and, you know, we still have to meet certain codes, and there's still a lot of requirements. And the reason I didn't do HUD also is that one is I have a difficult time competing with the Claytons and you know, when you're owned by, you know, the guy from Oracle. You know, it's difficult to compete with them. But secondarily, the barrier to entry it's a $250,000 endeavor for me to go through that.
Correct.
HUD certification. I just right now I can, and Robbie and I've talked about a little bit whether it might be worth doing, but I think that you'll find there's a lot more options to buy, and variety in that. Like I said, anybody's welcome to come down. We're right in the new, industrial park in Georgetown.
Is this a hot priority? Everybody would,
Oh, I would think so.
For affordable housing, yeah, because chapter 70 does give you exemptions to the, well, the manufactured housing committee, but legislators could also make those exemptions for that.
And this is a study group, absolutely. This is, my push is non-stick built housing. How do we normalize not, and this falls right into that category. Let's figure it out. Let's see if it
Let's
can-
face it, we have the tiny houses that some people will really object to, but something that has a little more, call it pizzazz or something that's there becomes, I think, a good alternate in terms of less expensive, something that can be done readily and moves as well.
let's go back to 112 and 113. I like to get that focus. First off, it's existing manufacturer homeowners are grandfathered to the current rent control structure and rental assistance practice, but new residents would not be. I think that's a high priority for keeping the remaining affordable residents in place.
I think this is where the committee is gonna have to vote. I think there's a robust discussion there.
Yeah,
The
how does
committee
everybody,
is gonna have to speak
who's
their
in
voice.
favor of it? Let me answer that. I am. Anybody else?
I am, because I think when you look at some of the other items, if you want to talk about real property versus chattel and having to deal with changing leases and things like that, then I mean, those may not, and there's even carve outs for long-term leases in chapter 70 now, but I mean, I think it's something that would preserve it. I mean, when communities in Dover are converting sections over to be mini storage.
Mini
and
storage.
Mini storage is a higher value return than the community. That's a problem.
And we're seeing that more and more, by the way.
You know, and in Fred's letter, I do disagree. There's a number of community owners that have sold, local guys that have sold, that have told me the reason they sold is because of rent.
Regulation.
All that money didn't attract it.
They wouldn't have sold.
They
Well,
would not have sold. They
Really,
would stay in
are
the
you
business.
serious? They're
I-
coming in with that kind of money? And they would say, no, I'm gonna resist it, I'm not gonna do. But basically, as soon as you remove, laws and regulations and rules, you get slumlords. You don't have to do anything. Now, you have one bill in here that we talked about that's requiring 5 years and 10 years, you have to look at the place. But still, until that happens, you have a problem because they won't do it.
Well, we want to get that passed because Robert and I are sick and tired of cleaning up everybody else's mess down here. So that's the reason that's going to pass this year. I mean, we're just sick of it. But if we don't do it, if we don't protect current residents, but we don't allow some flexibility in the system, we're going to end up seeing more conversions.
112 is not affordable, it's not unaffordable. Because it has no, there is the possibility, the reality of rents going up and up and up is attracting people who have higher incomes. It is not really protecting the class of people who are in there because once they go, that affordability.
Let me throw
goes.
something at you, Fred. The real fact is over a 7-year period, I can get the market anyway. And that's going to happen. The question is, do we allow a park owner to get there and preserve the park that's there, or do we risk having it sold for another use?
Well, if it's sold for affordable, I mean, basically, my community was developed for pop-up, for seniors. And you're now taking that and the money that was lent by Fannie Mae was for affordable housing. That's gone. I mean, that's been blown out of the water. So it's not affordable. And what you're saying is you want that money, not in 7 years, you want that money now. You want that, attract that person that has more income.
Can I,
You're wiping out affordability.
I didn't mean to interrupt. From a time perspective, I'm a little bit worried about where we're at. I see that we have a few that we still haven't.
Just two.
On the developers section, 116 and 119, I never got a priority level.
Well, my
116?
my other concern is we already have 16 high priorities out of 29, and it's 138. I know that you're going away, Jerry, for a few weeks. And that you won't be able to.
Well, I can probably do a Zoom call if we need to.
Okay, what I'm thinking is we may need to have one more meeting where we're actually voting on these things. Unless everybody wants to hang around for another hour or two today. Yeah, I didn't think so.
I'd be
So,
supportive of one more meeting for voting.
yeah, strictly for voting.
That's what we,
It would have to happen before February 20th, because that is the full task force meeting at which Jerry will be presenting to the full task force what you all have agreed on. Can we make that happen? Can we fit in another meeting?
I could fit in another meeting. It'd be easier if I did it that week, like the 18th or something.
Okay.
Because I'll be back then.
Okay, I think we need to plan for that because we're running out of time.
And even within the A's, we're gonna need to make some priority recommendations within the A's, correct?
Yes, yeah. So should we use the rest of the time to get everything either a high, medium, low, ABC?
Well, that's what we're trying to do the last two.
Okay,
That's what we're trying to do. And
But then we still have like.
there's a split on 112 and 113, and 113 is a crux of whether we're gonna build a new mobile home park or not. So, I mean, if that becomes a if we can't make that a priority, all the other stuff just isn't gonna happen. I think Robert would agree with that if we have to live in a rent control environment, you're just not gonna see new mobile home parks develop.
So what is the prospect of, if rent control were to go away, what is the prospect of people coming in and building new? I mean, how much of a game changer would this be?
I think if we knew for some certainty, I think there's some people who would look at it. The real problem is zoning. The second part of that question, it's a by metrics, it's a two-part equation. First, you have to get the economics to work. Then you have to get the zoning. Unless we can get some zoning relief, it's not gonna happen either. Nobody's gonna go through that abuse. I'm actually surprised at my micro home community, how much resistance there is and how much threats there are in the whole process. What I'm seeing now is a more dynamic, a more informed opposition than I've ever seen. And mobile home is next to a prison or a nuclear reactor in the way of getting people excited. And you'll see half a county come out now for a mobile home park. So we need to get something that's gonna allow us to develop by right. If we don't, it just isn't gonna happen. Zoning in Newcastle County costs somewhere between, just to do the zoning piece, costs somewhere between $250,000 to $500,000. That's not the engineering. So somebody's got to gamble that, and you're not going to gamble that if it's not a little bit easier to get it through the process. By the way, if you build a new mobile home park, the cost of doing the site work and the land alone, the price of a pad on a monthly basis is going to be $1,500 to $1,800. So it's not going to be affordable housing anyway, unless there's some type of break in the infrastructure cost or whatever else. Do you agree with that, Robert?
Probably somewhere there. Plus, I don't think if, let's say Habitat Community came in, and we had all these things where they could fast track a community and set it up, they're still gonna be subject to the version of rent control in the code. They're not gonna be able to change lessen rents greater, they're not gonna be able to, I'm not sure how, there's different things you have to agree to in the Sussex County on the affordable housing side of things, if it's apartments or rental housing, and that's set, but that would be very dissimilar than how the rent justification is set currently.
Correct. And the other,
So I think without some kind of change in that, you're not gonna have any new communities, whether they're, run by a nonprofit or anything. I mean, it's gonna be hard to do any of that, because none of that's exempt from that, and they can't set their own rules and affordability.
and I think it's really wrong, if I was to say, this is affordable housing of 1960. Where we were getting people in there in the 30-40% median income. It's not that at all. This is moderately priced housing. This is workforce housing today. What you're doing is you're putting somebody in a new mobile home park who's going to spend $180,000 on a house. The lot's going to cost $120,000 to finish out. That's excluding offsite costs. The net result is you're talking basically a $300,000 house a day. Or maybe 220 and the cheapest part if it was a single wide. But you typically wouldn't do single wides today, you'd do double wides.
So are you, to what extent then is this model of own the home and lease the land how much of that is just going to be obsolete?
It could actually be increasing, not in Delaware, but in other states, because if it costs you $450 in Newcastle County to buy a new townhome, and I can buy a new mobile home for $180 and lease it block for $1,000 a month, that's still cheaper than the $450,000 home, even at chattel rates.
So you're saying it's still viable?
It's still viable on existing parks. On a new park, you're talking about a different consumer, one who's probably in the 80% median income. So you're not talking about one that's in the 60% median income. That's a big difference.
So the place you're developing in, or you want to develop in Newark, I forgot the name of it, is that a traditional, manufactured housing community?
No, it's not manufactured at all. It's going to be, it's going to be panelized.
And are you looking to build another manufactured
No, I would do it tomorrow morning, but I won't do it in a current environment. Yeah.
Well, of course,
We don't want to, nobody would build a new community
I get
if you have to do rental assistance and you have rent control. If we had rental assistance, we'd probably be interested, but to have rent control and rental assistance is just a pretty big burden.
as an old reporter, what I'm hearing is that leased land is not going to be affordable. It is losing its affordability. The value of the manufactured home is being able to bring it on site, either for in fee or if they want to use the home to be rented as well. You can rent the home. There's one, St. John's, I think, they basically converted from leased land into where the homes are being rented. So you can do that, but it's no longer, basically, it's no longer, what you're hearing is it's not affordable. It's not designed for that low income, fixed income individual or family. It isn't there. And no one has come up with anything that says that it is. The only thing that you can do is if you follow what Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac say, state regulations. And as soon as I bring up, let's use the utility model, where you present what your costs are and you present, but you make sure that that's there. And you provide a profit, because you can't take a profit, but if you're giving a profit, just as you do for utilities, then you have something, but it has to be statewide.
If we were to use that model, our rents would be substantially higher though, because if we were on the rate of returns, the inflation rate does not do the proper adjustment for that. I've looked at that. And the other problem is, depending on what your benchmark is for utility models. If you look at, there's not that many public mobile home parks, but they're getting 20% return on equity or 15% on equity. And you start doing that, all of a sudden, you're at a 5 or 6% increase at different times when inflation's at 2%. So we want to be careful how we go into these models.
But that, I think, has to be studied. I think you have to take a look at it. If I would say there's a agreement, let's take a look at
But
it.
no developers could be attracted. to get
Because
involved.
you're talking about houses that are being rented, you're talking about apartments that are gonna be rented, and you're talking about leased land. And ultimately, that is where you are controlled, because it is too important. Affordable housing is too important to the economy, and it rates right with the utilities in terms of what we need. Because the higher the rent is, the more it affects businesses, the more it affects minimum wage. All of that is affected by what the cost of housing is. And It's gone sky high all over the place because of this. Because of what's happened here. If you want to, it looks like I got all kinds of files. You do want it. You want to look at it and see exactly what they're doing. Management fees, 2 of them, cost of administrative expenses. It doesn't make sense. And I blame our legislators because they're not asking the revenue people to take a look at this and examine exactly what they're saying. $300,000 profit, $310, $310 profit on a $1.5 million that they're collecting from 220 units. Doesn't make sense. There's something wrong.
So what I'm hearing is, I haven't heard from everybody, but basically this is not, there's not a consensus on either of these two considerations.
I think the 113 is the crux of it. I don't think anybody's gonna be opposed to grandfather, but that's, I mean, really, 12 and 13 should be put together. I mean, it's a tough. Coming from a perspective, coming from like a homeowner rather than a landowner perspective is, kind of my default, and it's a tough decision for me.
I'd like to see more incentives for property owners and developers to develop more affordable housing communities with stick-built and non-stick-built homes. Incentives are important. This feels like a piece of a study effort to identify a range of incentives with public support. Various kinds of public support to incentivize and encourage non-stick-built.
Well, if you don't correct the zoning and you don't correct the. No, but if you don't correct the zoning and you don't correct the financial incentive, you can't get developers to invest.
And I think, frankly, I think that's just an issue across the board, because at $1,000 a month, right, that your land acquisition, you can buy a $100,000 lot, right? You can build a smaller bond, and I think that's, to me, I think it's more of a policy decision to say, all right, where does the government want to essentially subsidize and say, all right, how are we gonna?
Well, that's why the voucher is part of it, but the thing you have to realize, the reason we have an affordable housing crisis now is because the right incentives are not there for developers to participate. Whether it's a stick-built housing, whether it's a multifamily housing, whether it's a duplexes, whether it's a manufactured housing, government consistently over the last 40 years has taken the incentives away from doing affordable housing. That's a fact. That's been documented. So if you don't want to put these incentives in place, then you're not going to get the results you want.
Sorry, I lost my voice there for a
That's
minute.
okay.
Where I was trying to go was, if we want reduced rents in new manufactured housing communities, then there should be public sector support and there's the low-income housing tax credits. I'm sorry, I just wasn't able to get that.
That's correct.
That balance is so important. And what I'd really like to see is that reflected on our recommendations. If you guys publicly want more affordable housing development, including non-stick built development, you all have to look at the package of things that encourage it. If you want rent control in your new manufactured housing properties, then how are you going to offset our costs in developing those? Say,
Thank you.
low-income housing tax credit.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, so that's why we have why I put vouchers in there. That's one way to do it. Again, I go back to the crux of it, which is housing security. And that's a supply demand factor for me. How do you create more housing security for the tenant, resident homeowner? How do you get the incentive to build that housing? And that's what this whole sheet does. Producing education, it's producing voucher systems that supports housing insecurity. It's giving incentives to developers. Unless you package all that together, you don't get a robust answer. All you get is, all right, well, you did part of the equation, but not all of it.
And on your point exactly, I can see an argument for reorganizing the recommendations as you get ready to present them to say, these are what we want to do to balance exactly what we're just talking about. These are what we want to do for information and perception change. These are fundamentally what we need to do on the zoning side so that these things are even feasible. You know, approaching it in those terms, like these are a package of incentives that could potentially help encourage more
Correct.
affordable housing development of this kind. And approach it like that.
But to me, the two priorities here of all of them are the zoning and the rent control, because unless you lift that burden, nothing's gonna happen.
And for me, it's absolutely zoning, and then figure out if priority is keeping the rents down, what are the
government gonna
local
do?
government's gonna do,
Right.
as with the low income housing tax credit program, to offset those.
And that's what we have.
We were able to do 12,000 units of tax credit supported affordable housing because there were trade-offs.
Jerry, to put it in perspective, when I came here 9 years ago,
Yeah.
we have 185 communities under DEMRA. Over the past 10 years, we've lost 14 communities have gone for change of use, 14 communities. So now we're down to about 171 registered communities. And we spent over $2.5 million in relocation expenses.
In less than a decade.
In about a decade, 10 years, just in relocation expenses. The trust fund still has about $14.5 million. It caps at 15 million. So we're looking at, either raising the cap probably in the next.
But that's so important to me. This comes back to your general objectives statement, which is, what are our goals? One is reduce the opportunity or reduce the pathways for losing the affordable housing stock that's currently embedded in manufactured housing, right? So how do we stop that? What are some of the things we can do to stop that decline? And then how do we expand the use, right? So it seems like those are the two primary objectives of this subcommittee, and all the stuff we're talking about falls into those categories in one way or another, as opposed to an individual 26 different recommendations. Because I think you've done a really great job. I think through some of it, I think it helps if we put that arch over the buckets. So there.
And then going back to the developers, I didn't get a priority on 116 or 119. I just wanted to make sure I had the priority reflected.
119 is high. There is, if anyone.
119 was high.
116, I did that. Yeah.
And in the context of what's the balance that the public sector can provide to help encourage development here, not freestanding, no traffic, no LOS. It's not that. It's that balance. What do you guys willing to do to help us do this? Robert, that's what you want. Jared, that's what you want. That's what I've.
So what I need from you, I like to get individual priorities from everybody, just to see what everybody thinks and file them. I won't put names on it, but it'll be interesting to see how we all vary. And then if possible, could you edit the document I put forward or give me some comments back on it so I can edit it? Fred put a couple comments in there. Does that mean put bubbles on it? Like somebody in the committee said, like Fred was opposed to the Delaware law section. Not that I agree with him, but I want to at least note it. And then on the individual bills, if you guys want, I would love to get pros and cons, at least cons on them, what you're against on things. Especially the rent control one. I think that's a really critical one because there's no one, Robert and I may be the only two proponents of it for the legislature, everybody against it, but we're also speaking for developers. If you really want to see housing of this type, and Mimi classified right, what is government going to do? When I began the conversation by saying, whose burden is affordable housing? Is it my burden, or is it the government's burden, or is it all of ours? And that's why I brought up the trust fund, that the housing trust fund, it's all of our burden. It's just not one party's burden.
Agreed.
And that's where the discussion has to change and hasn't changed yet. And, homelessness is the same problem. It's everybody's burden, not Ministry of Carings or, Department of Housing. It's all of our burden. Question is, how are we going to fund it? How are we going to be responsible for it? I don't know that answer.
So your goal from us is over the next handful of days.
Yeah, get that to me. Even though I'm away, I'm going to be working.
Okay.
And then I'll communicate back to you on certain things, and then we'll meet on the 18th, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, can we look at our calendars? So the 18th is a Tuesday.
You can try that Monday. That work?
If it's in the afternoon,
That's fine.
I could do that. But I want to make sure we have a quorum before we schedule it.
Can't do Monday. Are you talking about the February 17th?
Mm-hmm.
I can't do the
You do the
Monday.
18th then?
I can do the 18th or the
All right.
19th. either.
I can do 18th, I just have to be done by 3:30.
Okay,
I can do 18.
18th.
I could do the 18th in the morning.
So do we want to say, 10 a.m. to noon on the 18th? That would be
Yeah, that'd be great.
great for me.
That's okay? Yeah?
Aaron, I'll put a hold. I will figure out, a location. We may have to use, no, I think we actually could use Zoom for the next one.
Yeah, as long as
Here,
it's
yeah.
Zoom, I'm good. I'm away that week in February, for a conference, but I can carve out time to do a Zoom call, no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you, Aaron.
Sure.
So Jerry, would you do maybe it's just me, but a favor, if we all do these pros cons for the individuals, could you circulate those as well so that we're all understanding each other's perspectives, if that's okay with the other folks here?
That's what I'm gonna do.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I didn't know
That's
you
the whole
called
point.
me your burden. Jerry,
No.
That's
inform us.
That's what I wanna do.
Yeah, that's especially helpful, especially the cons.
Yeah.
It kind of, when I hear everybody talking here and I'm getting other viewpoints, that's really, really helpful because I'm kind of new to all of this. And it's just nice to hear the discussions.
You can't write more than 2 cons to anything.
Same for me, Aaron. Same for me. I like it that he told you that, not me.
And they're not very verbal either.
You guys, I think this worked out pretty well.
Okay, so I'm working on just a calendar hold for that date and time. If we're finished the discussion part, we do have to at least give an opportunity for public comment.
Sure.
So I'll get to that in a minute once I get this virtual invite out.
Would have been done. This will be fine.
Interesting what happens when you turn your car. When you take a look. Where are all these people coming? I want to say before we shut down, while Caitlin's doing that, you guys have really helped inform my perspective on a handful of things that I didn't have much knowledge of. There's still some things I do not know enough about to comment on, but I've appreciated the flow of conversation.
Okay, if anybody online would like to give public comment, please raise your hand. I think there's a raise hand button in Teams. And actually, it looks like we only have one attendee, and that is the room, so there is no public comment, but for those who are who may watch this recording later today, we will accept written comments in the next 48 hours. Those can be sent to housing.taskforce@delaware.gov. Any comments that are received in the next 48 hours will be appended to the draft meeting minutes for today's meeting. Okay.
Thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You guys, I'm leaving this year. It's all yours.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.